This presenter spent 20 years as a theater executive across the country. She spent her undergraduate years at Stanford and earned a Master of Fine Arts studying drama at Yale. In 2007, she joined New York-based Theater Communications Group as its executive director. Under her leadership, TCG adopted a major focus on diversity and inclusion, as well as audience and community engagement. Its new vision statement, summed up, is a better world for theater, a better world because of theater. Please welcome Teresa Eyring of Theater Communications Group, a SphinxCon founding partner.
Shackled up in slavery, and Uncle Sam never did a damn thing for me. Except lie about the facts in my history.
I'm going to take a cue from our last speaker and be hungry and silly for you. Anyway, that was a little bit of music to get us teed up here. I am here to talk about Audience Revolution. And Audience Revolution is actually a project, an initiative of TCG, my organization right now. But mostly what I want to do is explore a few ideas with you that I've just been mulling over in my own head. And the main idea is that the arts, that theater has the ability to diminish the degrees of separation among people, and to bring together people from wildly different backgrounds who may never have otherwise known each other, and that, you know, it's something to think about. How do we actually leverage this asset that we have, that is the art that we're creating, in order to bring people together more effectively than we do now? This is a picture of Tupac Shakur, and actually the music that was playing was a song that he wrote and sings, Panther Power. And Tupac is probably one of the most influential musicians, poets, rappers of our time. He also is someone who was really respected and loved by a lot of young people. His words were tremendously impactful. He was inspired by injustices that he saw around him. He was also a controversial figure in many ways. And as many of you know, he was killed in 1996 at the age of 25 in a drive-by shooting in Las Vegas. Last year, there was a hologram of Tupac that performed in California, which was interesting. Anyway, I never met Tupac. I've never seen him perform live, but I feel a connection to him because of this building. This building, it was built in 1920 in Baltimore, Maryland. It was originally built as a hotel and a ballroom. There were many jazz concerts that took place there. It was also a clubhouse for a Catholic organization, the Knights of Columbus, which was a men's organization. It was also, by the way, designed by my grandfather. And it became, in the 80s, I believe, the Baltimore School for the Arts. And Tupac Shakur attended that school. He attended that school. He studied Shakespeare. He studied to become an actor. He also wrote his first rap there, and it was about gun control, inspired by the death of one of his friends. So I think to myself sometimes, I didn't know this person. I never would have known this person. I listen to his music sometimes, but I feel this human connection to him because we share a connection to this piece of architecture. We've been in it. We have some part of our personal narratives that relate to this piece of architecture. And so in my own mind, I riff sometimes on how that connection happens with all kinds of art, and even through time. There's the concept of 6 degrees of separation, which many of you are aware of, is something that was really promoted by scientists and philosophers in the early part of the 20th century. And the idea was that any one person can be connected through no more than 6 introductions by other people. So you could be connected with someone, there's no reason why you should have known, all the way across the planet through 6 connections. In recent years, due to social networking and technology, those 6 degrees of separation have reduced dramatically. In fact, there was a story that was done last year in the UK Telegraph that said that Facebook has reduced the degrees of separation among people from, they say, 5 hops to 4 hops, which actually means 6 degrees of separation to 4 degrees of separation, and that's just in 3 years. I like to believe that theater actually has even more potential to reduce the degrees of separation among people. So you will see, in my mind, in 2013, the degrees of separation among people is really just 3 or 4 hops because of theater. Now, this may seem a little bit abstract. I want to give you a really clear example of how this breaks down for me. There are many theater projects that actually do bring people together from diverse backgrounds, from really disparate kinds of backgrounds. But there's one example that I want to share, and that is an example from the theater company that's called Universes. They're originally from the Bronx. It's a hip-hop theater company, but they created a piece that took them about 3 years to create with the Young Lords and the Black Panthers. Their idea was that they wanted to illuminate the history of those two movements and to make people recognize that the Black Panthers, while known as a very militant organization, also created some very important social programs, including breakfast for kids before school so that they didn't go to school hungry, and health care, and other really important social programs that ended up being picked up and perpetuated by our federal government. So positive things that those groups did, as well as some of the really revolutionary work that they did during the 60s. So I just wanted to show you, this is a picture of Universes with Bobby Seale. They spent lots of time working with him and talking to him, as well as members of the Young Lords and other people who had worked around them, as I said, over a period of about 3 years, and developed the piece that is called Party People and performed it at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival. Now, the reason why I became so intrigued by this sort of convergence of people who might not ever have known each other before is because when I went to see the show, I was driving in a shuttle with a woman who's white, middle-aged, grandmother, owns this shuttle company, and takes people who are participating in the shows back and forth from the airport to the theater. And she was telling me about how she had gotten to really know these different, members of the Black Panthers and the Young Lords, and how in the world would that ever have happened if it hadn't been for the project at this theater. So I was really intrigued by that. I was also intrigued by the fact, this is the artists, Mildred Ruiz and Steve Sapp, who are having a conversation in a kind of a audience talkback format with the audience about the piece. I was present for one of the conversations after the show, and what I saw in the audience was I saw older people, younger people. I saw an incredibly diverse group of people in the audience, and I knew from the conversation they had afterwards that their politics were really diverse as well. And so I heard an older gentleman who seemed like, and he may have even introduced himself in this way, somewhat conservative business person who, because of the themes of the play, felt this sense of perhaps being threatened by the idea that if you look at the economic conditions in our country now and some of the disparity that exists, could there be revolution? Could there be anarchy? That idea scared him in a way. So he felt comfortable expressing that. And the artists had the opportunity to respond. Other people in the audience had an opportunity to respond. There were young people who were college age who said, I didn't even really know this history. So they're being connected to the history as well as to artists and people who were part of that history. And ultimately, what was, I think, especially inspiring in this was hearing the younger folks in the audience ask the artists, we've heard this history about what was happening in the 60s and how the Panthers and the Young Lords were involved in trying to make change. How do we make change today? What can we do? And their response, back to the young people, was, You can make small changes in your community. You don't have to think about everything being a major, major transformative move. There's small things that you can do. Think about the small things. And also the other piece of advice was read. Read everything you can get your hands on. So the message here is that this piece of theater connected people who would not have known each other or talked to each other otherwise. A lot of the people who were in the audience were inviting the artists to then come to their communities. So that was exciting. We want this story in our community. We want to meet the people you've connected through this story. So I could see the degrees of separation diminishing. And I think other people who were part of this project saw that process taking place as well. So very exciting stuff. This is an actual production shot from Party People. And notice revolution, which brings us back to audience revolution, diminishing the degrees of separation. A couple things that I want to mention about how we're viewing this process of making change in terms of building diversity and inclusion in our field. And I realize that there are many people here who maybe are thinking about, I have to sell tickets to shows at my organization, whether it's music or whether it's theater, and really what's on your mind is how do I sell the tickets and sell the tickets to as diverse a group of people as I possibly can. And this is really, this thinking is really about not so much how do you get people into the seats, but it's more how do you change the thinking about what the art is and how it ultimately can connect people and bring them into a relationship with the work and with the organization and with each other. So that's an important consideration with this. The other thing that I just want to mention is that as we've talked to our own people in the field, theater people as well as organizations, about diversity and leadership and diversity and the artists who are working in organizations, one of the things that we've realized is that it's really a three-level process or way of thinking: the personal, the organizational, and the overall ecological. And the reason that I think it's important to acknowledge the personal level is because all of us have unconscious biases. All of us have, or some of us anyway, have feelings or are affected by images around us that we're not conscious of. And I think everyone has to personally deal with that in order to really effectively address building the next level of diversity within their organizations. And then every choice that's made at the organization level affects the overall ecology, because all of us, when we bring in artists, when we train future leaders for the field, that is going to affect the ecology that we all share together. So I think both in terms of audience revolution and just the overall building of diversity and inclusion in the performing arts sector, we have to think about those levels and what we can do to affect change at each of those levels. And then I think the last thing I want to do is just read quickly to talk about connecting, how art connects people through time. Oh, one other point is just that I think our fields together have grown up over about 50, 60 years, maybe more, maybe for orchestras more than 50 or 60 years. I don't know what the exact number is that you would say the age of the field is, but we've actually built something of an infrastructure that works even though we're under stress so often. And so for me, a big question is, and it goes to this idea of how we create a better world for theater and how theater makes a better world as a result of that. I think for the performing arts sector, it's the same idea. We've built up an infrastructure. We have resources, we have creativity, we have an artistic community. How do we take that and not only concentrate on how we strengthen ourselves, but how we then turn that to make a better world? I think that's a charge for all of us. So there was an interview in the Los Angeles Times in 1995, and it was with Tupac, and I want to just read something that he said because it really speaks also to the idea of connectivity through time, through the art, and the influence that works of art have, not just laterally, but through time. He was asked, you studied at the Baltimore School of the Performing Arts. Does your theater background influence your songwriting? And he said, it influences all my work. I really like stuff like Les Mis and Gospel at Colonus. And I love Shakespeare. He wrote some of the rawest stories, man. I mean, look at Romeo and Juliet. That's some serious ghetto shit. You got this guy, Romeo from the Bloods, who falls for Juliet, a female from the Crips, and everybody in both gangs are against them, so they have to sneak out, and they end up dead for nothing. It's real tragic stuff. And look how Shakespeare busted up with Macbeth, and then he goes on. But I just like that because it reminds me that theater and that art, again, it's created and that it lives not just in the moment that it's created, but it lives through time and it lives through people. So I hope that we can all make use of some of those ideas as I continue riffing on them. Thank you. Thanks. And I did it exactly in 15 minutes, right?
As president and CEO, this individual strives to make the Association of Performing Arts Presenters a strong resource for the arts industry. Before this role, he spent 7 years at the National Endowment for the Arts. Earlier in his career, he founded Yerba Buena Arts and Events, which every year produced an outdoor festival featuring more than 100 free performances, including ones by the San Francisco Opera and Ballet. In his 20-plus years as a presenter, he's worn a variety of hats. He's currently on the board at the Alliance of Artist Communities and the National Center for Creative Aging, among others. Please welcome Mario Garcia Durham of the Association of Presenting Arts Presenters, a SphinxCon founding partner.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning. What time is it here? Sorry. They switched the order a bit. I was supposed to go after Maria, but they asked me to step up now. So, how are you all? Excellent. I heard a quote last night that I thought was interesting. It's of Joe Biden, and he said, "Don't tell me what you believe. Show me your budget line for that," which I thought was really appropriate. And also something in addressing this issue of diversity. For every complex problem, there's a solution that is simple, neat, and wrong. That's by H.L. Mencken. So I wanted to start off by just saying a thank you to Detroit, everyone here at the hotel, and everyone's been so nice, so thank you for your hospitality. Also, I want to mention the sponsors, because we can't do this without sponsors, having been a funder myself. Thank you. And the staff and board of Sphinx organization, especially Xavier. And also to all the speakers. This is so great. Everyone's coming at this from different perspectives, so I'm really enjoying all of this, especially Jowle and Maria for last night. That was really amazing. And I also want to give a very special thanks to Aaron. He is words can't describe Aaron, so thank you, Aaron. Why I'm here. I have worked for many years with Aaron, and when I heard about this gathering, I was thrilled. I've been expressing to colleagues that I feel that we need to reopen or reinvigorate the conversations about diversity, and I know that my colleagues at the Performing Arts Alliance have expressed this, which is an organization of all the heads of all the major service organizations of performing arts, have expressed the fact that diversity is one of the key issues that they feel we should be addressing. However, I can honestly say that all I bring to this conversation is my experience and history. I've had a very, very difficult time with this presentation. I give a lot of talks, as I'm sure many of you do, but this one I've been struggling with, as my staff will tell you. Scott Stoner's here. I've been struggling as far as what I could do. I actually called Aaron a couple of months ago and tried to get out of this speaking engagement. I did not succeed. But the reason is because I have no answers. And the primary reason I'm here is to listen and learn, so I will try to keep my presentation short. For some time, I've harbored a sense of frustration that our discussions about diversity, equity, evolution of the field to address the changing dynamics of this country have stagnated or stopped in a place since the early to mid-2000s. I recall being involved in some really great programs in the 90s that helped or tried to address our changing nation. One of the ones that spoke to me was the Lila Wallace Arts Partners Program, which through its programs and panel process, where we talked about these issues in a very intense way, really helped presenters learn the best way to engage with diverse communities in their area. But my honest sense with you all, and that's what I love about this conversation, I'm approaching this as a conversation with my colleagues, is that when attending some gatherings in our field, that our approaches to this issue, the issue of diversity, of equity, are led by a certain way of thinking that does not seem to me effective in these times. I wish I could be more specific, but it's difficult since there have been a lot of studies and excellent reports from great colleagues like Roberto Bedoya, Holly Sidford, just to name a few. And I do feel a sense of goodwill and earnestness, but I still don't see the change that perhaps I was falsely anticipating. In speaking with Aaron, I commented that with all the thoughtful and intelligent, brilliant individuals that are speaking on various aspects of this topic today, I was concerned, and the reason I'm struggling about repetition and adding something of value. So, having accepted the engagement, I thought about the issue, and on a theoretical and personal one, the word that resonates for me, and is the title of my speech, is assumptions. Assumptions have often correctly or incorrectly led to some very important realizations in my life. I was born in Houston, big Catholic family of 7. Both of my parents were born just north of the border with Mexico in the Rio Grande Valley. Their first language is Spanish, and like many generations coming to this country, they thought for my own success and my family's own success that we would drop that language and fully embrace just being what they termed in the 50s as American. And keep in mind that when I was growing up in Houston, even the term Mexican, you're a Mexican, was a derogatory term, and actually it still may be in a bit. Luckily, my small group of friends that went through grade school and high school with me included Mike the Polak, Anthony the Italian, Larry and Tim the Germans, and Mario the Mexican. And and these are the monikers and variations thereof that we would call each other all the time. And that's because all of them had roots that were fairly new in this country. So even if I wanted to, I was not able to easily forget that I was of Mexican descent. However, to state that I grew up appreciating that in my heritage would not be accurate. That came much later. One moment I wanted to mention regarding assumptions had to do with a close family friend, Dr. Delgado. He's a friend of my dad's, and we grew up with the kids. And I remember it was 10 years old in Houston, and it was there was a lot of integration of neighborhoods, and they lived in a really nice neighborhood, Pecandale, that's what it was called. And I remember that all of a sudden black families started to move in the neighborhood. So I'm just a little ignorant, you know what, and I went up to Dr. Delgado at 10 years old, and I was like, oh my God, that's so horrible. How can you live there? And he turned to me and spoke to me directly as an adult and said they're the best neighbors that I've ever had. And that event, still to this day, moves me because it stopped me in a stupid, ignorant way that I was thinking, but it just with a slap on the face about my assumptions that I'd been operating under for a long time about, some realities that were not true. I left Houston in 1991 to begin work as the assistant artistic director at the Yerba Buena Center for the Arts in San Francisco. And as many of you know, the Yerba Buena Center is this wonderful multidisciplinary arts organization in San Francisco. It's really great. The organization, and the reason I'm mentioning it to you all, in my opinion, was built on the pinnacle of the great wave of multiculturalism from the 80s, all of those wonderful discussions. And we viewed ourselves, in a sense, as the end-all and be-all of multiculturalism. This, again, was an assumption. My boss and mentor, who many of you know, Baraka Saleh, and I spent the first year, as they were building the final building of the organization, hearing directly from members of the community there in San Francisco and the Bay Area how our organization was not the multicultural savior that we assumed it would be. There were issues of equity. Why does this new art center get millions in city support while organizations that have done years of difficult work in their communities are getting nothing? Privilege. Of course, the financially solid, prosperous artists and arts organizations are going to be at Yerba Buena. Access. Who gets in and who doesn't? And most importantly, and this is my angle into this whole discussion, who has the power to make real decisions in this institution? So again, another major assumption was proved false. In 2004, I joined the staff of the NEA in Washington, D.C. Having more of a national view, it became increasingly apparent that the issue of diversity was something that had not been solved. I received applications from communities of all sizes and backgrounds. And although the staff of the NEA, who I love, is really dedicated and works valiantly to make sure that panels are diverse, unfortunately, our efforts were not matched with the applications. The percentages of applications coming from organizations of color, for example, lagged behind in numbers and awards. An assumption that I had was that since in my program, the awardee rate was from 40 to 50%, that would be enough to get more applications, especially from organizations of color. I was wrong. Even attending great conferences like NPN, Alternate Roots, National Association of Latino Arts and Culture, and TAC, the numbers did not increase. I was disappointed and frustrated, and I knew the approach we were taking was not working to the goals that we had envisioned. On the other hand, as I was talking about this talk with Teresa this week, going, what were you going to say? She said, well, Mario, what about the presenting field, and all of that? And I said, no, that's what was so frustrating. For example, I would still, just when I left, recently, a couple of years ago, I would get applications where they say, we have a new Southeast Asian community in our area that we really want to connect with, so we're going to do Chinese opera. And they'll come. And it's funny, but it's also shocking because many people are moving along thinking, oh my God, there's some major lessons that we've learned through all of these years, and it's like it's just nothing. On the other hand, I would get applications like we're doing a fantastic remounting of Swan Lake, based on the original, blah, blah, blah. Fine. And then they would add a line that said, and we're going to be diverse. And it would have nothing, that would be it, on the false assumption on their part that if they put that in there, that the panels would go, oh God, they mentioned diversity, we'll give them high points. Never worked. So I had to question the assumptions we were making about our colleagues and the organization's understanding of the nature of diversity, as well as what happened with all of the lessons and all the good efforts that had taken place in the past. I left the NEA in 2011 to lead the Association of Performing Arts Presenters. This change followed many years of attending not only the APAP conference, but all of the national regional conferences. For those of you who don't know, there are a number of national regional conferences that occur each year. What I noticed in all the years of attending is that the issue of diversity was something that would be raised, plans undertaken, committees established, and many good-hearted conversations held, but to minimal to no avail. You heard the stats here. As to the field, yes, I feel there is a lot of diversity on the stages, but again, to the point of my talk, in the most critical area, that of leadership, the change, in my opinion, is minimal to not happening. Again, despite the best and sincere efforts of us all. The issue of assumptions really hit home, and the reason I want to talk about it, because recently when an employee of APAP and APAP had to part ways recently. And you all know how difficult those situations can be. The person was smart, very talented, and had a ton of potential. What I did not know was that this person had survived what I understand was a very tough childhood in one of the most difficult neighborhoods in one of the most challenged cities in this country. I can honestly say that I have no idea what this person has experienced in life. I truly do not. I cannot relate. I do not know. And it shaped this person's view and their actions and reactions. Needless to say, what I thought I was saying and doing was being interpreted by this person through the lens of their world. All of my assumptions and ways of operating ultimately proved ineffectual. And I started to question how I'm operating in that sphere in many parts of my work and personal life. I started to say, what do I really know about what I'm saying, what assumptions I'm making when I'm working on projects and speaking with individuals and wanting to accomplish this goal? This had me thinking. So in summary, our voices and the wonderful voices of leaders who were shaped in the 60s and 70s are shaped, in my opinion, by that time and worldview. I acknowledge that the discussion has indeed moved forward. Very good work on diversity continues, and I don't want to stop that. There are many success stories, and there are many, many artist and administrator heroes, and someone that I just saw at the NPN conference, who many of you may know, Rhodessa Jones, is a personal hero of mine and someone that comes to mind. There are many, many. So my thoughts are that we must not make assumptions regarding our efforts. We must not assume that changes and improvements we want to achieve with our discussions of diversity and equity are wanted or relevant. So I encourage us to welcome to our discussions new voices and perspectives from the new generations. I believe those future leaders and their visions are our hope. Thank you very much.
Having just heard Mario's presentation, hearing his story about how as a 10-year-old boy he had these assumptions that were turned around, I'm curious. I want to go on a limb and ask you guys, what comes to mind? Any one word or a phrase that comes to mind that you guys want to just shout out? Anything? Or not just about that? Frustration. What was that?